I love collectibles, all kinds of collectibles, but my absolute favorite are comic books. And if you have even the slightest interest in collecting comic books, then you've no doubt heard of CGC, the company behind these highly sought after framed comic books that tell you, the collector, exactly what condition they're in. But what's that actual grading process like? I ventured down to the CGC headquarters in Sarasota, Florida at the same time Todd McFarlane happened to be there. If you don't know who Todd McFarlane is, he's pretty much a legend to comic book fans. Not only a groundbreaking artist who created characters like Spawn and Venom, but also a business wonderkin who co-founded Image Comics and forever changed action figures with his company McFarlane Toys. He's here at CGC to sign hundreds, maybe even thousands of comic books.
Yes, thousands and thousands, let's even say tens of thousands.
Now, you guys can't see, but there are stacks and stacks of books over on this side. Do you need any help? Because I would be happy to jump in and sign if you know, they wouldn't even know.
If I could find somebody to actually help me, I might actually take them up on it. But here's where you can't help me. I'm betting you can't help me.
I'm not left-handed for one. I'm right-handed. I don't know.
And that's it. There's where you're screwed.
I knew
right?
it. I knew it. That's true. You have one of the best signatures of all time. How long did it take you to develop the signature? Like, were you like in 5th grade practicing it, dreaming one day that you were going to sign just thousands and thousands of comic books over the course of several days in Florida?
No, Chris, I'm going to tell you a story about my signature. I used to have a very flamboyant sort of cursive signature. And then I always thought when I was collecting, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but when I collected comic books, you know how they had people's names in the gutter? Mm-hmm. I thought that was their signature. So the very first time I ever went to a convention, I'm probably about 16, I got some signatures from people and they signed it, and it didn't look like that signature, and I was horrified. And I was like, what are you doing? No. And they went, what? And they were looking at a little boy. No, that's just our name, because it's a gutter. We don't have room for it. That's my signature. And I was so offended. I can remember walking out that day going, that's a letdown. And so I vowed that day, that convention, if I'm ever on that side of the fence, I'm on that side of the desk, I'm gonna make whatever I sign on the cover be the signature I give you in person. So that basically it does what I thought should have happened when I was 16, right?
Wow.
So now, fast forward, I get into comic books, so now I have to change my cursive, right? So I change my signature to match what I put on there. The silly story of that is, again, it used to be when you went to a bank and you had a bank account, you have to have a signature card. Mm-hmm. So the first time I go there with my new signature, literally, the security guards tap me on the shoulder. Yeah, we need you to come to the back room. And I went to the back room, and then the person running the bank came, and they went, what are you trying to do today, sir? I'm like, just get my money. I just need a couple $100. I'm going, well, we have a signature card for Mr. McFarlane. And they pulled out my cursive, right? And I went,
yeah.
No, this is my new signature. Oh yeah, why is that? I'm going, because I just broke into comic books and I gave them this big lecture about, and they're going, oh, the old comic book theory. Like, what are you talking about? That's the biggest bullshit we've ever found, right? And so I finally grabbed the piece of paper and I go, give me a piece of paper then, right? And I go, here, you want me to copy that? Boom, and I nailed it. Because I go, that's my signature. I'm just telling you, I'm changing it now from this day forward.
Speaking of your signature, sometimes you sign Todd and then other times you sign T. McFarlane.
Yep.
Is that just so you can cut out 3 extra letters and save your wrist a little bit of pain?
Yes, like, and it may seem like an inconsequential thing, Chris, but 3 letters times tens of thousands of items.
Oh, I know, it adds up.
It's time. So it's like, yeah, I probably do 15% have my full signature. Right? Every now and then I just go, come on, this one's cool. I'm just gonna like this one. Here, I'll give my big one, right? Yeah. Like why? I don't know. I just do it randomly.
There's all sorts of books that you've got. What do you think the cover that you sign the most is?
There's a couple, I see them all the time. I'd say probably Spider-Man #1, because there were so many of those printed, and Spawn #1. Mm-hmm. And then tucked right behind that is probably Amazing Spider-Man 300, because that's not only a valuable book, but the origin of Venom. The Wolverine with his claws up from the Hulk issue.
Yeah.
See a lot of those. And now, actually the one that's hot, I've noticed here, is right here, by coincidence. Right?
This is mine actually.
Oh, shit.
This is my copy. Be careful with that.
I'm gonna ruin the book for you, because once I tell you what I'm about to tell you, you're never gonna unsee it. They forgot to color the moon yellow right by his head. Mm-hmm. And then they forgot to color the moon yellow right here where they colored it red. And so when I see this book, I gotta tell you, every time I see it, my eyes go, error. And people like you who've had it forever go,
I never noticed it.
Here's what's funny, I don't know if you can even see it. What's funny is that the missing yellow is right next to his head. And people are going, I never noticed. I go, you never looked at his head before? Like it's right next to his head.
I just get so lost in the cape every time.
Right. So now you're never gonna not see that. From now on, you're gonna
I'm actually gonna need you to sign over some of these.
With yellow? I've done that before. I've actually corrected it. I've actually corrected it.
Is it gonna mess up my grade?
They call it a remark. No, they call it a remark now. You actually get a remark. That it's like somehow they consider it art now because I put some damn yellow on your thing.
The Signature Series program is when CGC authenticates that an artist or creator that's involved with the comic book has in fact signed the comic book. In a nutshell, all of the Signature Series books that you see come through that have that beautiful gold prestigious Sig Series label have been eyewitnessed by CGC, a witness of CGC, or a facilitator.
Okay, and right now we're doing a special with Todd McFarlane, and we have a special label on the Signature Series, so tell me about that.
So Todd McFarlane has graciously allowed us to use his iconic McFarlane scroll label. So any of the books that Todd worked on that someone sends in that isn't like a Spawn book, but maybe one of his Spider-Man ones, a Venom book, you can get the McFarlane scroll label. Or if you sent in a Spawn book, we have a Spawn label that we're using. And these labels are 100% exclusive to Todd's in-house signing. You can't get them after. You couldn't get them before, and they're not available anymore because his signing has already cut off. So the people that got in are very, very lucky. It's going to be a one-of-a-kind label, and when he does his signing again in a couple years, he'll do a new version of the label, so that will be exclusive to that future signing.
So Matt, tell me a little bit about what it is you do here at CGC and how long you've been here.
So I've been here for 10 years this February, and I grade comic books, simply put, but there's a lot more that I do as well. I'm involved in assessing books for grading or for pressing, do restoration removal. Also manage the room and the graders and the flow of the books, and basically just keeping an eye on everything, and also working on some new ideas that we always have coming up.
Well, how long does it take somebody to learn how to grade a comic as efficiently as it sounds like you do it?
Yeah, it does. It takes a while. The misnomer is that you can read something online and just learn how to grade or grade a few books, but the truth is that you need to grade thousands and thousands of books to get really good at it. And it's not just grading, it's also assessing page quality, identifying restoration, and then even going beyond that for more advanced collectors, identifying enhancement possibilities like pressing, restoration removal, and things like that. So over the 25-point grading scale, there's obviously grading high grade comics is different from low grade. High grade is more of a science, low grade is more of an art. So there's a lot of nuances to grading, and it takes a long time.
Now, what is the most valuable comic that you yourself have had your hands on and graded?
Well, the most valuable one that's sold, which is Action 1, I think it currently, Superman 1 currently holds the record.
Yeah, they just told us that it was like $5.3 million, right?
Yeah.
That it sold for. That's insane.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 of them that keep fighting for the top position. Amazing Fancy 15, Superman 1, Action 1. So luckily, I've graded all of them. I think all the ones that have broke records I've seen at one point or another.
Is there a difference between grading, say, a Golden Age comic, a 9.0, versus a modern comic, a 9.0? Is there a different set of standards based on the age of the comic?
Well, handling defects and environmental defects like tanning, fading, things like that, those are the same across the board. So we grade those the same regardless of the age of the comic book. But then when you get into printing defects, they differ from era to era. So printing defects on Golden Age are very different than they are in Silver, and even today we have new comics that come out with printing defects, but they're all different because the printing process has changed. So we do grade those differently based on the era.
Now, there's not a lot of 9.9s or 10s out in the wild. I almost never, even with some modern comics, I mean, it's almost always 9.8 is the highest that I see. What is it that takes a comic that extra little point to get to the 9.9 or 10 level?
Yeah, it's tough to get them. It's usually the modern comics. New comics have been just printed because obviously older ones get handling wear, or they age, they fade over time, or get a little bit yellowed. But as far as like, it really just takes one little, like for instance, spine stress lines. That's the most common defect on books, particularly high-grade books, and we count them. And so in a 9.9, we allow one little stress line that can even break color if it's small enough. But the rest of the book has to be perfect. And so in totality, the book really can have nothing wrong with it. And yeah, we're pretty stringent on 9.9s and 10s, so it's pretty hard to achieve a 9.9.
Now, a lot of collectors now can get their comics pressed. How does that affect the grading, and what's that process like?
So pressing is something that that was my main business before I came to CGC. Basically, it just removes defects that can come out with pressing to raise the grade. And because you're not adding to the book, it's not considered restoration, so the book still keeps its universal grade. But if it's done safely and properly, and it gets all bends out, any dirt, spine roll removal, any kind of anything that can come out with the pressing can potentially raise the grade. Not every time, it's not a guarantee, but certain books have certain defects that come out that actually will raise the grade. So that's our main service at CCS that we use, and a lot of people utilize that because either they want the book to be as good as it can be when it gets graded, or they've found books out in the wild that they can tell through the holder that have defects that can be fixed, and they're hoping to get a higher grade in that case.
X-Men #1, the strangest superheroes of all. How often do you come in touch with this book?
Oh, probably hourly. No, not quite that often, but we do see we see it several times a week.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the Marvel Silver Age keys come through often because obviously it's a combination of being the most popular, most valuable, and they're not rare. They didn't suffer the paper drives that the Golden Age did, but they're very hard to find a high grade. So we usually when we see them, they're lower grade.
All right, let's see what we got.
So yeah, first impression, very pretty, very nice, very solid copy. Seeing just a little bit of tanning going on the cover, some wear here on the edges and corner. The first step that we do is count pages. So I count back to front. Some people do front to back. And while I'm counting the pages, this particular copy is going to have 8 pages in the back and 8 pages in the front. And while I'm going through and counting the pages, I'm also assessing page quality, checking for any defects like tears, missing pieces, coupons that are cut out. And then when I reach the centerfold, I've confirmed that the back does indeed have 8 pages. And then it's important the centerfold because I'm checking the staples as well. This is a critical point in the book because we can tell a lot by the staples. If they've been taken apart, if they're rusty, if the centerfold's detached, we can tell trimming from the centerfold as well. And then after I finish the assessment, in this case, the staples actually look like they've been taken apart. And so, and the way I can tell is because the prongs don't quite sit naturally, and that's something that you pick up from obviously grading thousands of books. And so you can see how the prongs are not quite facing each other straight, and there's a gap in between them, which means that they've been crimped. And this one as well, you can see how the prongs are kind of poking in different directions. So that's a red flag, so we'll check further after the page count. So then I keep going to finish the other 8 pages. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the book is complete. The page quality is off-white, maybe off-white to white. It's a little bit whiter here and a little bit darker up there, but somewhere between those 2 page qualities. And after I've confirmed its completeness, then I move on to assessing the defects and, of course, continuing the check for restoration. So we'll run our thumb down up and down the spine to check for glue, something you can't see but you can feel. Mm-hmm. And glue is very common on spines, particularly the Gold and Silver Age books. But besides that, we've got obviously some wear going on here in the corner. There's a reader's crease here. Basically somebody was folding it over and reading it. Then you have a dust shadow here as well. So as far as restoration goes, because the staples have been taken out, it's a number of things could be on the book in terms of restoration. It could be a reinforcement at the staples. The staples could be replaced. I don't see that in either case. The cover could be cleaned. But the cover does look kind of white, but at the same time it still exhibits the stains and the dust shadows and the tanning, which are typically things that come out with cleaning. So my initial reaction is I don't think the cover's been cleaned, but and sometimes people just take books apart for no reason. So it's possible that there is no restoration. Given that the book was disassembled, I'm going to take a closer look at the interior wraps to see if there's any indication of marriage. And here, right off the bat, I noticed that the first wrap actually falls short of the page behind it by about 1/4 of an inch here at the bottom. And then if I check the back, it does appear that the last page actually extends out past the interior page behind it also by about 1/4 of an inch. The page quality matches really well, but given the dimensional changes, I think there is a possibility of marriage. And another indication is the staple holes. And here I see there is the presence of 2 staple holes on this last page that don't line up with the cover. They're actually set into the page, and they're also a little lower than the staples in the cover. So given that, I think that this first wrap has actually been married into the book, which would give it a qualified grade. So moving on, now I'm basically going to assess the grade of the book, and taking all the things into consideration. It's a little bit tougher with the lower grade books because they usually exhibit multiple defects, and so this is where the art of grading is more subjective because you can't really quantify this stuff. And so I'm just basically, I've got a mental picture in my head of all the X-Men ones I've ever graded and all the, the grade ranges that I've graded where this book lands, and kind of comparing this copy to those and coming up with an assessment. And so usually I start with the narrowing method in that case, which is, what does a book look like? More like a 2.0, a 4.0, or a 6.0? So I'm feeling like it's more probably like a 4.0 would be my starting point. And then from there I'm going to adjust up or down. And so, yeah, just given a little bit of the, like I mentioned, mainly the tanning, the stains, and then this wear in the bottom corner and the reader's crease, it's probably, I'd give it a solid 4.0 leaning down to a 3.5. And that's where I would land. But I think I might actually get a 4.0. So I guess my final assessment would be 4.0.
This next one is X-Men number 13. This is the second appearance from Juggernaut. This is my personal copy.
Yeah. So initial impression is this one's pretty nice. Yeah, this one's nicer than the X-Men one. It's got you can see here a crease here. Because this one's a little bit higher grade, it's going to be easier to quantify the defects on this book because they're mostly structural defects. So if you hold it up in the light here, you can see all the stress lines and how they protrude. You got some indents down here. There's a light stain right here as well. It goes through the inside cover, and on the front cover you've got your typical spine stress lines, which is on almost every book in existence. If we start with the spine, you're probably looking at like maybe an 8.0, 7.5, particularly with this wear down here. When you start adding in the creasing on the front, probably moves it more into a 7. And then you flip it over, and does this affect a book in a 7.0? Not really. This is these indents, which come out with pressing, are going to be more in the 8s and 9s, and so this really doesn't move the needle for me as a 7. But when you take this stain here into consideration, that's going to push me down to the 6s. So now I'm down in the 6 or 6.5 range. And by the way, we skipped the page counting process, but the pages are close to white, I'd say off-white to white, and in this case, these staples do not look like they've been monkeyed with. So you can tell these line up a little bit better.
That's right, I didn't touch them.
Yeah, and these are, they're inserted real tight there, and so I could tell just by looking at a lot of books that those have never been taken apart. So it's unrestored, and I'd give it about a 6.0.
Awesome. Journey into Mystery, 83. That looks like a real pretty book.
Yes, at first glance, yes, and it is pretty.
At first glance, it's about to show me.
Yes,
it's about to show me why I'm not a grader.
Now this is a good example of, this one has restoration, so obvious restoration, or at least to a grader. But it does look pretty initially because some of the defects on the cover have been covered with color touch. The areas that are most commonly color touched on comics are the dark areas because that's where the defects are most obvious. So the spine, of course, is a culprit often, but in this case, Journey 83, which we see a number of copies, often if there's color touch on this book, it's usually in the purple or in the gray here on the edges, or in the red, like particularly in Thor, or even the banner down here, or the logo. And sure enough, in this one, I don't know if you can see in the light, but these smudges right here, here, and here, and here. So somebody took red, it looks like chalk or crayon or something, and they colored in what was probably color breaks. Where the color is missing. And then you can see as well in the purple, looking straight on, it looks perfect, but then when you tilt it in the light, you can see these little, you can see where there's wear. And an experienced collector or a grader is going to know that wear that looks like that in the light should break color, and yet it doesn't. And so that's an indication that there's color touch. And there's also some over here in the purple as well. And then if you look closer, there's some in the green. As far as the defects go, creases here on the back, some light staining. You can see the stain a little bit more in the inside cover. Pages are off-white to white. And here you see there's a piece out. But it's not very big, and I don't think it's really going to affect grade given all the other things going on. So, I mean, overall the book it's in the 4s. It's probably going to, around maybe a 4 or a 4.5, just because it has good eye appeal. And obviously looking closer, the defects are going to bring it down. But it looks better than a 4.5, especially with the color touch. But I also have to assess the color touch as well. And so CGC uses a quantity and a quality scale. Quantity is 1 through 5, 1 being the least amount, and 5 being extensive. And in this case, the color touch is going to be between a 1 and a 2, because it's in several spots. And then the quality, which is a scale of A, B, or C, A being the best and C being amateur. And the main difference there is with a C, there's bleed through. And so if I look on the inside cover where the color touch is, I don't see any color bleeding through, any ink or any of the whatever material they used. So it's not a C, but at the same time, the material they used is not professional, which is typically acrylic or watercolor. Most color touch like this is amateur. They use markers, pens, crayons. We give those a B if they don't bleed through. So this color touch would get probably like a B1 rating. So overall, the book would get a 4 or 4.5 grade, but a restored label, purple, with the indication that there's color touch present, and that color touch would be assigned a B1 grade.
Well, so Dale, tell me a little bit about why you're here at CGC and what you do.
I am the Modern Comics grading team lead. So I kind of keep the Modern team on track, make sure all tiers of all Modern Comics get out and keep a healthy turnaround time, so customers get their books back at a decent time.
What's the definition of a modern comic?
Anything 1975 and to recent.
So we were talking about this a little bit earlier about how difficult it is for a 9.8 to go to a 9.9 or a 10.
Sure.
Now, for modern comics, does it become, are you seeing that a little bit more often with the brand new comics, because people might be buying it off the shelf and then getting it graded immediately, versus like in 1975, people weren't getting their comics slabbed
Sure.
right away?
Yes and no. So unfortunately, the vast majority of comics are manufactured 9/8. So that can be with bindery tears, little scuffs, anything like that, and they're just kind of off the line. They're 9/8. But it kind of has to be a perfect storm now. You have to have tends to be more of a thicker paper stock cover or a high gloss or something like that. And some newer companies or newer books are starting to realize that, and so they print a lot on those, and you tend to see more 9/9s and 10, obviously, but it's still pretty rare because the littlest thing can take you down.
Now, Dale, I know that you're a professional, but I need you to be extra careful with this, because Todd just signed it for me right now, and he did the whole first name.
Oh.
Actually, it's not T, it's Todd.
got it.
Now, where are your gloves?
Well, we can't wear gloves because you gotta be able to feel it. You gotta have the dexterity to kind of. If I was to wear gloves, there's a good chance I'll bend it. The first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of give it a once over, see where I'm at, check page quality, check staples, make sure there's no rust. We got a couple stress lines, a little bend, a couple more stress lines. First thought, I'm thinking 8.5.
This one's my next one that I've got.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, Iron Fist 14, first appearance of Sabretooth.
Yep, so see this one, even though it may look out of the light like it's going to be off-white to white, these are white pages. This one's a beauty. Kind of give it a once over, see where I start to get to right away, and then just start going. The same thing, just little bends, spine stress lines, nothing too major. This one I'm gonna be an 8, because you have a little bend going on up here, stress lines, and then the littlest fingerprint stain.
All right, here we have Ultimate Fallout number 4, first appearance of Miles.
Oh yeah, this one has really skyrocketed recently. The main thing with these is they were issued in polybags. And so more often than not, people will submit these thinking they're 9/8 and they're perfect because they're right out of the polybag, but a lot of them tend to have a polybag bend on the back. But pressing always usually saves that. This one's a nice one. You have a little bit of spine stress lines, and you have a bend up here. But all in all, the bend is going to take you down a little bit. This is going to take you down a 9.2. Also, I also think this one would benefit from a press.
I do have an Action Comics 1.
You do?
I do, yeah. But it was, I bought it when the Batman movie was coming out, the first Tim Burton one. And so all the prices were getting elevated on the Batman, and everybody was ignoring the Superman and everything else, because it was like Batman, 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 Batman. So Detective 27 was going up.
Yeah.
And I went, how much for an Action 1? And it was like, what? Why would I pay more for Batman when Action Comics is 1936? Like that's the start of the race, the superhero race.
Right.
Just because people were ignoring it. I'll take one of those, right? Shoot, thank you. But I'm going way back in the time machine.
Yeah.
So I think that cost me $12,000 for an Action Comics 1.
Now, I also saw that you signed a little bit earlier, I saw you signed a Malibu Sun. And there's been some debate over if that's Spawn's first appearance or not. So what do you consider Spawn's true first appearance?
Spawn 1.
The debate's over, guys.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
it.
I understand all the conversations of like an ad. I don't know if an ad is like an appearance. To each his own, everybody sort of grabs it, but Spawn 1 is when it all started. Of course, we have to advertise.
Now, speaking of the Spawn movie, recently you announced that you had some big name Hollywood writers coming aboard. Have you got to check out an early draft of the script yet?
Now, I talked to one of the writers the other day, Scott Silver, the one that was the writer on Joker. He's involved right now with pretty in depth. He goes, Todd, sorry, I'm busy, but they got Joker 2 that they just started production on. Right. So he's involved in that. But he said that they're about halfway through a rough draft of the first sort of pass of it. I mean, you know, these scripts can sometimes do 2 to 10 passes, right? So, but he'd go, no, we're about halfway through it. I mean, everybody's moving in the direction that they want. Everybody's focused on getting this thing sort of done. Yeah. So the plan is to get it all done and put it up for sale next year.
Is the intention to still keep it on the lower side of the budget as far as Hollywood, like superhero blockbusters go?
I don't think that's the plan now. I mean, my original plan has gotten tripped up a bit, right? So,
well, I remember you talking originally about how Spawn was going to be sort of almost like a side character in the shadows. You didn't see him a lot.
Right. So you deal with a lot of people in Hollywood. So again, none of this should be surprising. But you start bringing on A-list people, right? And we've got A-list people, and not just one, but multiple A-list people. And it's going to continue to grow, right? Once we get there, and especially once we sell it to a studio, and even more people are going to come. What they're not going to do is want to do a cheap, low-budget movie with all these big-name people on it, and that's not why they're signing up. They're not looking for a big extravaganza, but they're not looking for an $8 million horror movie budget. Right. And then the piece that I have to be realistic about is that once somebody says, yes, we'll take all these people, we'll put the decent amount of money, potentially even buy maybe multiple movies up front, they're not going to want a first-time director. And that's the piece. If I got one craw in me, but I know as a CEO, if I'm practical about it, I wouldn't take that deal either. If somebody came to me and go, Todd, we've got all these talented people and we need your money to help invest, but the person leading the charge is a newbie. Right? Like, whoa. So they're gonna have a lot at risk, depending on what the deal is that we cut with them, and they're gonna want to get it back, and I don't think that they're not gonna say, we're gonna get our money back by giving it to a newbie director, right? So they're gonna want to get a pro. They're gonna go, we got all these other pros, we need a pro. And so I've had that conversation with everybody, and there's a bit of a collective sigh, because they go, we're gonna have to break it to Todd anyways, but I knew that was the reality of it. So we'll just figure it out. And part of the deal, I'll just make sure that I get to direct something else.
So Matt, tell me a little bit about what it is you do here at CGC.
So yeah, I'm the vice president of CGC Trading Cards. So basically kind of oversee the operations. I oversee the grading quality of everything like that, manage big dealers, pretty much everything there is to do with the day-to-day operations. I try to keep my hands into it.
So you've been doing this for a long time. How have you seen the trading card industry grow in the time that you've been working in this business?
People have been grading cards since the 2010s and everything, but it hasn't been really mainstream until the last 3 to 4 years. years. There was a big boom, when a bunch of influencers got involved with Pokemon. Pokemon Go showed up, and a lot of people kind of took to the market with graded trading cards, especially Pokemon. And you've seen the prices rise solidly throughout the last 4 or 5 years. There's a little bit of a downturn right now, but there's still a lot of people like really ambitious and really wanting to get into collecting. And with our company coming into the market as well, we offer kind of more of a dedicated service to gaming, trading cards that is, and it gives people a little bit more of, proper designations, error attributions, and things that you wouldn't find at other, third-party grading services that we try to provide.
Well, tell me a little bit about some of the technology that you guys are now using to grade cards.
So we use a bevy of technology. We do all kinds of fun things. We have a couple different proprietary machines that we actually use to break down chemical composition of the cards. Break down pretty much every source of light you could ever throw at a card, just to really detect alterations, see if it's actually just a straight-up counterfeit. Some cards are pretty crude, older ones, playtest cards and things of that nature, where it'd be easy to replicate, but of course if you break it down to that chemical composition component, it's pretty easy to see that it's fake or not.
Now, are you a collector personally?
Of course, yeah.
So what's your most prized card that you own?
It's a playtest card. So playtest cards are basically what they use to figure out the game before they even release it. So this is from the Gamma playtest from Magic the Gathering. So back in 1992, all the nerds in the Bridge Club and the Math Club got together with Richard Garfield and were like, hey, let's do this cool idea called Magic the Gathering, and it was literally just cards cut up on notebook paper, both a little heavier card stock, and they used images from comic books, Dungeons and Dragon manuals, things of that nature to illustrate the cards to make them look a little more appealing. It's really cool to see the evolution of the Gamma playtest into the Alpha printing, which is Magic's first printing in '93. It's just really special stuff, and it's super rare, very esoteric, just kind of niche, but that's the kind of stuff I like. Yeah.
What's the peak card? Like what's the
big dog for trading cards?
Yeah, the world champion of trading cards.
We'll just look at Magic and Pokemon. So for Magic the Gathering, it's the Black Lotus, the Alpha version. There's also one called an Artist Proof, which they only made 50 copies of. But the Artist Proofs are pretty esoteric again, so it's not really mainstream. But the Alpha Black Lotus in high grade is the bee's knees for Magic the Gathering. And then for Pokemon, English cards, Charizard first edition, the one you always see.
The one Logan Paul has?
Of course, yeah. Charizard. He's got actually both the ones I'm going to mention. But yeah, the first edition Charizard is, the first release in '99 for Pokemon, and it has, the first edition stamp. Other than that, you have a Japanese card, which is called the Illustrator, and that's the one you might have seen. Blake Martinez came through. He sold one in a sale for about $700,000 in our slab just recently, and that's another one that Logan Paul has in the competitions holder as well. But we've rated 5 of the latter, 5 of those Illustrator cards in the last 5 months. Okay, so we got a great bevy of stuff here. Magic and Pokemon, 2 of the biggest TCGs obviously out there. So first and foremost, these are probably the most iconic that you recognize everywhere, but they're the big 3, they call them, kind of like you think of basketball.
I even know who Charizard is.
You do? Yeah. Okay, great.
Now, grading-wise, I see we have an 8.5, an 8, and a 9.
Correct.
So what is it? Let's just use the 8 and 9 for example.
Yeah, so those are the ones the farthest apart, yep.
What is the difference, what's the biggest difference that makes this go from, like, this is an 8, this is a 9? Is there anything you can point out to me?
Yeah, sure, of course.
That?
Yeah, so like with the 9 grade, you're probably looking at mostly manufacturing defects at that point. Maybe a couple small handling defects, but overall eye appeal from about here is going to look like a 10. You're not going to be able to tell the difference until you get really into the card. Whereas an 8, you might have something that might pop out a little bit more, like this top left corner here. You can see I kind of have a little bit of white on there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, right in this area here. And that's the biggest attraction from this card. You have a little bit of edge wear up here on the top. It kind of continues over here on this edge here. You can see a little white nicks. But those nicks are just from handling defects. That's not manufacturing defects. Manufacturing defects will mostly be limited to the corners or the surface of the card. Very rarely the edges will get messed up, unless it's cut in a certain different way. But we try to strive on knowing how these cards are cut.
All right, do we want to do a little grading?
Yeah, let's grade a card.
Show me what you got here.
We get a first edition Pikachu. So this comes from the same set as these 3 cards here. So this is obviously one of the most popular Pokemon there is in existence. Everyone knows who Pikachu is.
I knew who Pikachu was.
Yeah, exactly. And there's 2 different variants of this card in particular. There's a Red Cheeks version, and there's also this Yellow Cheeks version. The Red Cheeks one's more rare. And then there's a couple other really intimate detail ones. There's one that's called a Ghost Stamp, first edition Pikachu. That one's really rare. But this is your run-of-the-mills first edition Pikachu. First thing you notice right off the bat is centering. We look at the centering like it's a picture frame. So, with comic books, it might be a little more difficult. You don't have that border that wraps around the book every time. But with most Pokemon cards, they're always going to have a nice border around them. Some of the more modern ones don't, but there'll still be devices that you can use to determine centering. This one's centered pretty decently, but then after that, you kind of want to get the nitty-gritty details. And basically what you want to do is get the card in what we call a sheen angle. So you have the light bouncing off the surface of the card, and it gives you kind of like a little map. First thing you notice when you bounce the light off this card, right? You see that?
Yeah, I see it. Little indentation.
Yeah, so that's basically from someone grabbing it a little too hard here at the bottom. Like they got really excited when they pulled that Pikachu, and put a little dent in it. Typically, you'll see them on the left and right, just like that. What we call a binder ding. They put them in the 3-page binders. It rolls over the top of the ring, gets pressed up, and you put a big dent in the card.
So is a binder not a good place to keep your cards?
No, a 3-ring binder we do not recommend. You want to have the stitched-in pages.
I've got so many Marvel cards that I've ruined.
Yeah, no. That just the ones on the left side of the binder page are going to be affected. But so this one's got a little dent in the bottom. That's not going to help the case of the card. You can also see this corner right here is flipped up quite considerably. Certain corners will have a little bit of a flip, like older cards, like older Magic cards like this will have a natural flip in the corners. But this one here is just simply from the card hitting the ground or hitting some blunt surface. So that's going to play a factor in the grades. And then the edges, your right edge here is pretty beat up. The left edge here has a little bit of whitening. So the edge grade, I would say, is probably going to be right around, a 7.5.
Okay.
So we have most of our grades here already figured out. The centering, like I said, a little top to bottom, probably 9. So you have a 9 centering, you have 7.5 edges, you have 7 corners, and a 6 surface. So with all those grades in mind, you're actually going to achieve a 7 overall.
Okay.
So this will be just barely, out of that 6.5 range, which is kind of like out of the near mint area. This is like the very bottom of what near mint would be. It'll be excellent near mint. So decent card, especially for it being in 1999. Yeah. It's pretty old. So yeah, nice little Pikachu. And then what I always recommend is we actually use card savers, the more flexible ones. And they kind of hold the card better because with these top loaders, if you put them in and then all of a sudden they fly, the card will come just sliding right off the top of it, if you went like this. Yeah.
This is why the CGC cases are so brilliant, though, because idiots like me can't.
I can hand you this Black Lotus and you can be fine with
$500,000.
Yeah,
just chuck it. Yeah.
Speaking of which, want to take a look at that Black Lotus?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is limited edition beta. So Magic the Gathering came out in '93, so they had limited edition alpha and then beta, which was supposed to be the same set. They were supposed to be indistinguishable, but what had happened is they messed up. You can see this alpha card here. See the corner on this one, how much more rounded it is than this one here?
Yeah.
So the alpha one was cut with this really heavily rounded corner. And when Magic ordered the second printing of alpha, because they wanted more, the limited edition, they got these, and the manufacturer, Cartamundi, who made the cards, actually messed up and made the corners more blunt, kind of like a playing card. And when they got delivered, they're like, well, what happened here? So eventually, they became known as alpha and beta because they were so distinguishable by the corners. But in theory, they were supposed to be the same exact card,
Yeah. So this is technically a second print then.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So alpha was printed much more shortly than beta was. It's about a third of the print run for alpha. Then beta was about 3 times as much as alpha. So, for the rares in alpha, there was only 1,100 made. So 1,100 alpha lotuses, whereas in beta here, 3,300 black lotuses were made. And this is rough numbers, but just right around there. But you think about how many cards they make these days, though, that's a trivial amount.
So if this is worth roughly, $500,000,
sure, yeah.
right? Then what would the alpha version of that be?
Oh, over $1 million. Okay. Yeah, in a pristine 10. Yeah, there's one of them our competition has graded. We have not yet graded a pristine 10 alpha lotus. We've come close, but that's kind of card that will just bring out the biggest of collectors.
Matt, tell me a little bit about what it is you do here at CGC.
So I'm the senior video game finalizer. So I go through and I'm the last step at looking at any video games that come in, any really cool video games that come in. They all come through my hands, really.
Well, what's the rarest video game you yourself have ever graded and had your hands on?
In terms of rarity, it kind of depends. So I've had many gold NWCs through my hand. So, here at CGC, I've already seen a gray Nintendo World Championship. So what that was is a competition in 1990 called the Nintendo World Championships. And so the cartridges from that are kind of the holy grail, the action ones, you want to say, of video games. And they really mean a lot to video game collectors.
people have been collecting comic books and coins for a long time, but video games are a little bit of a newer collectible. So how does that compare to those?
I think we see the same things. Like the things that mean the most to us are really the importance, right? So those Marios, those Zeldas, the Pokemon games, that's what everybody comes back to and has the nostalgia and collects. And then you kind of go deeper into the hobby, just like in comics or coins. You start to explore the options that are available, and you start to see Nintendo World Championships and games called Little Samson, which is a really good game for the Nintendo that's really uncommon. There's a lot of these holy grails for video games that are just uncommon, and then you have sealed copies, like these factory sealed copies that are very rare, especially in high grade. So that's why certification is so important, is that these really high grade copies are very, very scarce.
So right here we have a not factory sealed complete copy of Spawn for Super Nintendo, and my man Jason here is gonna go about grading it.
So we're evaluating this as a complete in box game. You know, we'd look at the box and all sides, but we'd start out by opening this very delicately, and all Super Nintendo games, it's kind of neat, open from the right side. So here we get to look at all the contents, and we just have, you know, we're going to verify that everything's authentic. You know, we know if this has been photocopied, you know, if the staples have been replaced, if it's been markered in and stuff like that. So let's just start, we'll start with the cartridge. We're going to look for things like burn marks and scrapes, and from putting it in and out of the system, we're going to look for scrapes up the sides and up the back. We're going to look on the actual paper label. If you see on this one right here, we actually have a little whitening in the label here. You know, it's just from years of people playing it, and it, you know, it just gets a little scrape, you know, in it here. So my evaluation of this, you know, we don't really have any scraping on the plastic anywhere, but just as important as the sticker on the back, we're going to make sure there's no wear and tear on it. We're going to make sure the contacts, the gold pins and everything, you know, everybody used to blow on these.
Yeah, I miss video games. That you could
I know, that made them work. Water and electric mix well together. So we make sure those are nice and clean and the gold is still, and there's no cuts in that too. We test this on one of our machines to make sure it works. It's going to grade really nice. This is in great condition overall though, no scuffs on the plastic. So it's going to be like probably about a 9.4. Unfortunately, just because of that.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that we're going to evaluate is the condition of the manual, and we're going to look for edge along the wear. We're going to look for spine ticks and stuff. This manual is really nice. It's probably about a 9.2. Things that are also really, really cool about this is it actually has an original Spawn poster with it. And since this is actually a very game-specific insert, we actually will grade this, but it doesn't go into the overall grade.
Gotcha.
It's just, we grade it so that maybe a future buyer can see the contents, and their poster might be a low grade and they might want to upgrade.
Since it's technically locked away forever after at that point, you just want to know what's inside.
Other things are just like your standard manufacturer insert. You know, all Super Nintendo games have this. And then your normal consumer book. But the most important, manual cart. We take those two grades, we average them, we add them together and then do an average. Then we got to evaluate the box. So I'm going to look down inside this box. I'm going to make sure there's no signs of repair, like taped together, glued together, mold, you know, all those type of things. From opening it a few times, we can see here, we actually have like this crease line. I mean, it's a really nice box. This for Super Nintendo from the early 90s, this is amazing condition. This is probably around a 9.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's probably going to fall about a 9.2 overall grade.
Now, where do you see the future of the business going?
Yeah, technology is going to make it more and more accessible for people to get into collectibles and enable them to make smarter decisions. So we're working on mobile apps that are going to make it easier for people to research their collectibles, learn what the value is, submit it for grading, maybe then list it in a marketplace. So what we're trying to do is offer a full suite of services to the collector.
Do you think the collectibles are as beneficial as, say, investing in the stock market?
So I'm a collector, so I always collect first and think about it, what do I want to own? Like, what do I love? I think about the investment, as a secondary piece. So there definitely are people who look at this as a true investment, but for me personally, I always just buy what I love.
Did somebody put this over it before it dried?
Everyone saw that.
Who did that?
Did I do that? Was it me? Yeah. Was it me? I'm so sorry.
My name is Gern Blanston.
I'm so sorry.